Welcome to English revision for Macbeth. Today we're going to look at our 7 AO2 quotes. The first quote we come to is "Fair is foul and foul is fair" from the opening scene. So the first thing that we're going to say about this quote is that it is a paradoxical language, something that seems to be true possibly, but can't be true, something contradictory or confusing. Now, this establishes some key ideas for the play right from the beginning, that we have appearance versus reality, things that seem one way but perhaps aren't, and deception and lies. We know that the play is going to be full of lies and deception just from this quote. Fair is foul means good is bad, so it shows us that what is good and evil are blurred and confused. Fair, obviously, as an adjective means something that is good in this case, and sometimes things seem good in this play. Macbeth, he seems to be a good man to start with, but he turns out to be foul. At the start, he's presented as this hyperbolic hero, almost an exaggerated hero, but in reality, he's an ambitious and violent man. Then we've got the word foul. This means bad, and it reflects the fact that good and evil in this play are interchangeable, and we can never really be sure which is which. It also tells us that this play is about appearances, what we look to be like, rather than what we are. And we can see that we've got this foulness, this evil, almost polluting Scotland, polluting the characters. So we see this evil playing throughout the whole play. Then we've got the word is. Now this is a verb, and it's an absolute word. It means something that is absolutely true. It doesn't leave a lot of room for doubt. So the witches have control over fate, including Macbeth's. Now it's important to remember that this line is spoken chorally, so it's spoken together. All three witches speak at the same time in chorus. Now that emphasizes that they have unified power, so when they work together they are more powerful, but it also shows us that they don't have an individual identity. They're almost one character split into three different parts. King James wrote a book that stated that magic was evil, and when they speak like this chant sounds like a spell, and that plays on the fears of the audience. It also shows that the witches see things very differently to other characters. There's also anastrophe here. Now that's where you change the normal order of things. So fair is foul, and then that's swapped to foul is fair. It shows the witches can change things and subvert things. It's also spoken in trochaic tetrameter. The witches mostly speak in this, which is slightly odd and otherworldly and different to the other characters. So there's this eeny, meeny, miny, mo sort of rhythm to the way they speak. And that is almost childlike, and it shows that they relish, they delight in bad things. Their hatred and their evil is something they enjoy. This line also foreshadows Macbeth's first line in Act 1, Scene 3, where he echoes these words. He linguistically mirrors them. He speaks very similar words. So foul and fair a day I have not seen. And that links him immediately to the witches from the first moment that we see him. Our next big quote is Macbeth's zoomorphic journey. So zoomorphism is obviously when we apply the traits of animals to characters, and Macbeth has a number of animals that he's described as. So we're going to start with lion, and then the cat in the adage, and then finally tied me to a stake, but bear-like I must fight. So this is zoomorphism. And the first thing we would always say about zoomorphism when we see it is that it implies that a character is less human than they used to be. So as a reported language, the captain is telling us this about Macbeth, that he is a lion. We don't get to find out that he's a hero on our own. We're told it. So his reputation precedes him. We see he's earned that through violence as well. Lions are opportunistic hunters, so this could also foreshadow the idea that he's an opportunistic man. He sees an opportunity to kill Duncan, and he takes that to advance his position. yet they're lower in the great chain of being than human beings are. So again, emphasizing that he's less human. Now, by being zoomorphized, it shows us this descent into animal-like or animalistic behavior. It foreshadows his later loss of humanity. Lions are predators. They're dominant. They're ruled by instinct. Maybe Macbeth is the same, a predator, dominant, ruled by his instinct, his ambition, rather than reason. And this also might reinforce to us that from the very beginning, he has less humanity. We also know that lions are animals known for their superiority, for their power, and for their bravery. So Macbeth is likely to be the same, somebody who is superior, who is powerful, and possibly quite brave. We're also told that as a lion, he's like the king of the jungle. So if he's king of the jungle, that perhaps foreshadows that later on he will become king. He will rise through the food chain as lions are the top of their food chain. Now, this emphasizes the respect that was given at the time to violent men. Shakespeare is subtly suggesting to us that we should be careful who we place our trust in and who we respect, as Macbeth is proof that if we trust people who are violent, they may well use violence to gain power for themselves. A final point that you might like to use is that male lions rely on females to hunt. So this perhaps tells us that Macbeth's relationship with Lady Macbeth is one where she has to do a lot of the work initially. She's very proactive in the planning of Duncan's murder. She has to do a lot of the work to persuade Macbeth, and perhaps that relates to how male and female lions work in the wild. The second big part of this quote is, again, it's part of the zoomorphic journey, and Lady Macbeth alludes to, she makes reference to an adage. An adage is a simple story. So with like the cat in the adage, like the cat in the story she's talking about is an old story about a cat who wants to catch a fish but can't catch it. It's next to a river, it can see the cat, but it's too scared to get its paws wet. When Lady Macbeth refers to this story, then she's portraying him as a coward. She's undermining his masculinity, undermining his bravery. She's emasculating him. And this is what she does to try to provoke him to action. Shakespeare might very cleverly be commenting on how the gender expectations in a society could be quite restrictive. If people feel they have to fit into a masculine role, then they can be easily emasculated and therefore manipulated. Here he's also been downgraded from the wild lion at the start to a domesticated cat. The other thing is it makes regicide seem simple. Lady Macbeth is saying that all you need to do is do it, get your paws wet. And that makes the act seem something less impressive than or less impactful than it might otherwise be. The final part of his zoomorphic journey is they have tied me to a stake, but bear-like I must fight. So it's still zoomorphism, of course, but he's now a bear. Now bears are considered to be brave and powerful. So he sees himself as brave and powerful, but he also knows he can't escape his fate. Being tied to a stake is a reference to bear baiting, quite a common event during the Elizabethan and Jacobean era. Now, as somebody who's tied to a stake, he knows he cannot escape. He's like a wild animal that's been captured, and he knows he's going to die, but he's going to keep fighting because fighting is all he knows. The word they is a pronoun, and it shows us that Macbeth is blaming others for his fate, reminding us perhaps that he doesn't have any responsibility for his own actions. We saw this after Duncan's murder. He blamed Macbeth and Glamis. He used the third person. He's now blaming other people. That stake possibly reminds us of witches who are also tied to a stake, and also shows us that he cannot escape, but perhaps the witches were involved in his fate. And the word fight here, the verb to fight, he's got to fight. He feels like he's got no other course of action. Violence is who he is. He doesn't know any other way to get out of this situation. The simile, bear-like, reminds us that bears are predatory animals, just like lions. So has Macbeth really changed, or was he always just this violent man? The only difference this time is rather than being motivated by patriotism and fighting for his king, he's now fighting for himself. Bears are lonely creatures. They live a very isolated life. And this mirrors Macbeth's isolation here. And then the pronoun I really reinforces that he's on his own. He's lost his thanes, he's lost his kingdom. It is just him on his own. He's lost Lady Macbeth. Now, finally, for the context for this, we may talk about bear baiting again, as I mentioned before. There's a sense that bear baiting was a bloodthirsty sport. People like bloodthirsty sports. And so if he's competing with bear baiting, which might even be happening outside the theatre, he needs to give the audience some blood. And so he's almost referring to this with this quote. Our next quote is, "Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires." A brilliant quote because it allows us to dive deep into Macbeth's ambition, and we get to talk about the moral consequences of what he does. Firstly, stars are associated with heaven. It's believed God put the stars in the heavens, so the stars are connected to that. Macbeth then wants to hide his actions from the stars and therefore God and heaven, because he realizes if God sees this happen, then this is the ultimate sin and he will go to hell. Stars are also often seen as guiding forces. They're seen in the Bible as the guiding force that led people like the wise men to Jesus. However, Macbeth wants the stars to hide because that's not his path anymore, and he wants them to hide the good path, the noble path. He also uses an imperative verb here, to hide your fires. He calls for darkness to assist him to conceal his ambition. He tries to command nature, something only God can do, although the witches also have a limited power over the weather, so he might be calling on their powers as well, and that links him with evil straight away. He wants power. He believes the world should bend to his will, and by commanding the stars, this arrogance, this hubris we call it, leads to his downfall. It also shows a desire for control and power which breaks the great chain of being, because he believes he can deviate from God's design. Jacobeans would believe that the whole universe followed the order of the great chain of being, but here he thinks he can deviate from that. He can even command God's light. Now, this reveals him to be ambitious and arrogant, and these things lead to his downfall. So here we also see Manichaean imagery. So Manichaean imagery, remember, is when we have light representing positive forces and good, and then an absence of light, so darkness, representing evil or the negative forces. So here with the word light and also with stars which create light, he's associating light with goodness, with virtue, with honesty and with God. He doesn't want light to see what he's about to do. He needs to be linked with evil to do this, so he can't have the good forces seeing him. The word black is an adjective here, and he means darkness really. He means an absence of light. He's making a link between himself and evil. Now, this word is obviously associated with the absence of light again and darkness. He needs that. He needs that to conceal his actions. This also shows the internal conflict that he's going to have later on when he decides not to go ahead with the murder, because we've got a juxtaposition of light and dark. We have the adjective deep here, which is an indication of how strong the desires are. Anybody that argues it's the witch's fault that Macbeth turned out the way he did needs to look at this quote, because it's not the witch's fault. He says deep desires. You don't just get a deep desire on an instant. It's something that takes time to develop. So the witches have told him he's going to be king, but he already had a deep desire. So he's aware that his desires are almost bottomless. These are rooted in him. So we need to question, was he ever really that hero we saw him as at the start of the play? And this is his hamartia, the fatal flaw in a tragic character that will prove to be his downfall. And then we've got desires. This noun shows that these are something that he wants, not that he needs. He wants these things. His ambition and his need for power overrule any sense of guilt or right and wrong at this point. This next quote follows the relationship of the Macbeths, and how they begin very close and how their relationship becomes much more distant as the play goes on. So we begin with Dearest Partner of Greatness. This is a letter that Macbeth gives to Lady Macbeth in the first act of the play. It starts with an adjective, dearest, the most dear, and that shows that Macbeth sees Lady Macbeth as his closest, his most precious. He trusts her. This seems like a relationship built on real affection. He also calls her a partner. Now, this noun establishes their equality. They know each other really, really well. But it also subverts, it goes against the expectations of Jacobean marriage. In a Jacobean's worldview, they would think that it is a woman's job to look after the domestic sphere and he should control the decision making. It would be considered his job to control his wife, and to call her partner suggests that he's failing in this. The audience would possibly blame him because the influence that she holds over him would be seen as his fault. It's his job to control her. It also potentially suggests that they're reliant on each other to succeed. They need each other to be great. It also tells us that her power is linked to his. She's only great if she's his partner. Now, the word greatness, this noun, reveals that their partnership is built on being great. Now, it could mean that they're already great, but it also might suggest that they could be great or greater, and that might suggest a hint about wanting to kill the king. Now we have dear wife. This is how Macbeth refers to Lady Macbeth in Act 3, and there's a clear change. She's no longer dearest, she's now dear, using the adjective. And it reflects her change in status. She's now less important, almost like she's become the wife that she should have been before. Jacobean expectations would expect this a lot more. The wife should be compliant to the husband, and she should recognise that she's less important by their values. And this is what's happening here. She's lost her own identity. She's no longer partner. She's now conforming more to those Jacobean expectations. Perhaps he feels now that he's got power, he doesn't need her to be his partner anymore. But there is still a term of endearment here. There is affection, she's still dear to him, but there's less of it, and they're more distant. Now, Shakespeare might be showing us, obviously, that a relationship like this that's transgressive is doomed to failure. Finally, he doesn't talk to her anymore. He now says, "How does your patient, doctor? How's your patient doing?" This is a huge change in their relationship. It's quite an impersonal question because he's talking about her as a patient, not as a person. He could visit her, but he's chosen not to instead. He wants to know how the doctor thinks about her. Yes, he could be checking on her health, but it feels much more distant. He also says with the pronoun your that she now belongs to the doctor, not him. It's not my wife. How does my wife, doctor, is very different from how does your patient, doctor. So she's his problem now, not Macbeth's problem. He's detached himself and doesn't have any responsibility anymore. Patient's really neutral. He's distanced himself from her rather than being a patient or a partner or a partner or a wife. She's now a patient. She's defined by her physical weakness now. He sees her as inferior, as less important. He thinks maybe he's still got a chance to succeed, I think, at this point. Shakespeare's message is really clear. If you pursue ambition, if you use violence, if you are complicit in regicide or any other sort of evil, the consequences to your marriage, to your relationships, are sure to follow. Our next quote is, "Come thick night, and pull thee in the dunnest smoke of hell." Lady Macbeth says this when she is by herself and she's trying to command forces that are supernatural to support her husband. First of all, we see this symbolism of darkness when she asks for her actions to be hidden. So we could talk about this again as Manichaean imagery. The absence of light is what she needs, so she dwells with the darkness and allies her with evil. She knows her actions are evil. She uses the imperative come, so she's showing that she's attempting to control dark forces. She's almost echoing the witch's power over darkness and weather. This would be seen as transgressive behaviour for a woman in Jacobean times. The darkness here is also metaphorical. It represents evil deeds, and she's talking about the things that both she and her husband are about to enact. It's an invitation for darkness to conceal her, to hide her from heaven peeping through the blanket of dark. It suggests that she knows that God will judge her and her husband, and she needs to hide from that. This idea then of hiding things is continued. She says the word thee, which means you. This is about Macbeth then. She wants him to be hidden in the smoke of hell as well as herself. We've got the word dunnest now, a superlative, and it means darkest, not just dun, not just dark, but the darkest. And this really reinforces that she understands how enormous her sin is and how enormous Macbeth's sin is. Perhaps she wants it so dark that she can't even see her own actions, because we do see her full of guilt and regret in Act 5. So perhaps here she needs to hide from these things because she can't face them herself. Thick night. Now this could be a reference to demonology written by King James, where it was written that the devil could thicken the air to hide himself. Lady Macbeth desires the same sort of concealment as the devil. And then she talks about hell. She's calling on hell, and this may reveal that she's not inherently evil. She wants hell to conceal her because this would be easier. She understands also, though, that she's going to go to hell for these actions. She's calling on the most evil force a Jacobean can imagine. We come now to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. This is probably one of the most important quotes to know. This quote's brilliant because it links to a wide range of themes. There's a comment here on masculinity and femininity. There's a comment here on deception and appearance and reality. There's a comment here on consequence and guilt. There's even a comment on what it means to be a king, because this is what they're going to use to kill a king. So this is a simile and a metaphor. So we're going to talk about both of those techniques at the start. We've got an innocent flower, but because this is a simile, he's like an innocent flower, so he's not actually one. Whereas the metaphor of serpent suggests that that's what he really is. Like, to be is a state of being, you will be the serpent. So you'll be like a flower, but not really, but you're actually going to be a serpent. So we look at the imperative verb at the beginning, look. Lady Macbeth is in charge. She's adopting a dominant role in their relationship, feeling comfortable to speak to her husband like this. That again subverts those expectations of Jacobeans, the expectations they would have of women and of marriages and of husbands. By directing her husband to behave this way, she is subverting this. Women were meant to be meek and mild, although it was feared that the way Lady Macbeth is behaving could be the way they really behave if not controlled. Then we've got the innocent flower. So this is floral imagery in the simile, and it suggests that she wants him to appear innocent. A flower is visually appealing, and they're no threat to anybody else. She wants him to be the same, visually appealing and of no threat to anyone else. She wants her husband to distract other people by looking nice rather than looking like a snake. So then a flower is camouflage. It's a disguise to hide his real nature, to deceive other people. Flowers also bloom into beauty, but ultimately they wither away. They're temporary, like this disguise. Macbeth may be considered to have bloomed recently, but the titles bestowed on him and his reign, they're all going to wither away soon enough. So there could be a bit of foreshadowing here. Some flowers have thorns, which possibly is a warning, and you perhaps shouldn't trust those that appear innocent. The word innocent specifically then is associated with women and girls in Jacobean society, and so she's asking him when she calls him innocent to subvert the masculine expectation. Feminine qualities would suggest that he's less likely to be suspected of bad things, and also that he's less likely to feel like a threat. Finally, under it, the preposition implies that evil may be hiding. You need to hide your evil, but that evil may be underneath many of our behaviours. So now we have the metaphor be the serpent. It's zoomorphic, which again suggests that he's lost his humanity. Serpents are considered to be sly, aggressive, and predatory, and so therefore is Macbeth. They're considered to have sinister qualities. They're potentially venomous, and this means that Macbeth is sinister, possibly poisonous. Snakes are loathsome creatures. They're connected with craftiness and cunning. They crawl on their bellies as well, so it suggests that they're linked to cowardice and deception. So being a serpent is a cowardly way to act, particularly for somebody who's supposed to be a brave hero. Snakes are cold-blooded creatures. When we use the phrase cold-blooded when we talk about humans, what we mean is they're emotionless and without remorse. Lady Macbeth is telling him he needs to be emotionless to carry out the regicide. We later find out she's right, because the emotion that she carries of the guilt is what ultimately undoes her. Snakes have two fangs, which perhaps represent the two daggers used to kill Duncan. So we could say at that moment he actually becomes the serpent, the downfall of humankind. Snakes slough their skin as they grow and change, so it suggests to us that Macbeth is becoming something new by doing this. Snakes are also predators that strike quickly and aggressively. Macbeth is going to need to seize the opportunity and be quick and aggressive if he wants to succeed. Two bits of AO3 information for this quote that are quite important. First of all, serpent has a biblical connotation. So this is a reference to the Garden of Eden. Now, the story of the Garden of Eden in the Bible is the story of bringing original sin into the world. The serpent is commonly believed to be the devil. So is Macbeth having to become the devil? Now, in the original story, Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, and they're not supposed to eat the forbidden fruit. But a serpent convinces Eve to eat it and then share it with Adam. So is Lady Macbeth in the role of Eve here? Is she tempting Macbeth, leading to the downfall of him and mankind? Or is it the other way around? Is Lady Macbeth telling him he needs to be the serpent, and as the serpent is the downfall of mankind in the story, is he going to be the one to bring evil to the world? The other bit of context about this is the gunpowder plot. King James I was paranoid about plots against him, and the gunpowder plot was one such plot. So the plotters were under the House of Lords. So here we go, the serpent under it. Is Macbeth then going to be the serpent beneath? Now we know that serpents and flowers are linked to this because King James released a coin with serpents and flowers on. You can see it there at the bottom of the screen after the gunpowder plot. So this could be Shakespeare playing up to those fears. He could also be mocking King James. Our seventh and final quote is, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood from my hand? No." So this happens after the murder of Duncan. Macbeth has left the chamber and he is looking at his hands with the blood on them. His wife has tried to take control of the situation, but now he's looking at his hands and feeling guilt. So first of all, this is a question, but it's also something we call hyperphora. This is a question very much like a rhetorical question, but in this case the question is answered, and he does answer the question with no. He questions fate and consequence by asking this question, but he knows the answer. He knows that the answer is no. He's done something unforgivable. So even though he's questioning fate, he knows the answer to it. He also talks about Great Neptune. So Great Neptune is the Roman deity of the sea, the Roman god of the sea. Macbeth tries to appeal to a different god, not one that's Christian, because he knows his connection to God is severed. He cannot ask for God's forgiveness anymore, and so he asks for a different god to forgive him. Now this god Neptune is the god of the sea, so Neptune is supposed to have complete and absolute power over the ocean. But Macbeth knows that even that power, even the power of the seas themselves, cannot absolve him, cannot clear him of the guilt that he feels. This is hyperbolic. This is really exaggerated. All the water on earth cannot wash away the guilt, which emphasizes how enormous his crime is. The next part of this quote relates to a series of really important symbols: water, blood, and hands. The first one, wash. So water is used as a symbol of purity and new beginnings. The act of baptism is something that clears you of your sin, that washes away your old sins symbolically. Lady Macbeth says to Macbeth that a little water clears us of this deed. So she's suggesting that a small amount of water can remove guilt, can remove a crime. But Macbeth is looking at his hands here, and he's realizing that even all of the water of the oceans can't wash the blood from his hand. And that shows us he realizes the magnitude, the enormity of this crime. Blood is often used as a symbol of guilt and violence. Spilling blood is a crime. And if you kill a king, if you commit regicide, that's the most severe crime of all. So blood here suggests violence, that this is an act that should not have been carried out. It's wrong. But being caught red-handed also shows that he feels guilt for this. The hand then is the third symbol. So a single hand, not two hands, it's one hand. So it suggests that he feels responsibility, just my hand. He feels responsibility for these. He knows the blame lies with him. Now, hands as a symbol or a motif are used to describe the action we can take in the world, how we affect our world. Most things we do to make a difference in the world, our hands are the things that act those out. So it's a symbol for responsibility and for actions. He's been caught red-handed, meaning he's got blood in his hands, although not caught by anyone else, just caught by himself. And so he feels the guilt for what he's done. Now, later in the play, mixing the symbols of water and hands, and blood, I suppose, Lady Macbeth cannot wash out an imagined spot of blood. She has to wash it again and again. So it suggests once we've got blood on our hands, guilt is not easily removed. Now, finally, for a bit of context for AO3, in the Bible, Pontius Pilate was a man who absolved himself, removed himself of responsibility by symbolically washing his hands. But it didn't work. He was still responsible for the death of Jesus, and many people talk about him going to hell as a result of that. So it's a powerful idea that no matter whether we wash our hands, we cannot remove guilt. Water cannot remove all your sins.